Hi, Kimmery. Welcome to the Cosmic Heartist podcast. I am so excited to have you here. And I would love if we could start with you introducing yourself, sharing about what you love and some of your favorite things to do in the world.
Okay, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. And my name is Kimmery. I am a mom and a wife and a poet and a million other things, an absolute anomaly, a contradiction probably every single day. Um, and some of the things that I love to do, I love the deep dive into who we are, right? Like that is what started me on this journey was being honest with myself. So I'm loving all of the times when I have a couple of minutes to myself, when the babies are asleep, or, when I can do something honest with myself. And for me, that looks like a ton of things. A lot of it is writing, and I love that. Right now, I'm taking morning walks every day. There's like a really tall hill behind my house. And the first thing in the morning, I just walk up the hill. Like I needed to get out of bed. I was like in this rut, and I was like, what if I just like climb a mountain first thing? Like, how will that make me feel? And so and then I did, and I did it with no music and no phone. Like I just wanted to be with myself. So if I can find things like that where I'm just with myself and in a space where I can be honest, where I'm not scrolling, where I'm not, on the gram, which we all love and hate, you know, where I'm not being pulled in a million directions with everybody needing me for something, when it's just me, like, and it gets quiet, like, I love getting to know myself, I think is probably the best answer to that. And at first, it looked like meditation and yoga. The first poetry book I wrote was happened because I meditated every day for a year, and just I don't know what happened. I just started writing things, and I had majored in poetry in college, but I felt like it was for fun. I taught English middle school. I taught language arts in middle school, and that was what my English degree was for. The poetry part was just like, because I was eclectic and I was weird. I wasn't going to do like literature. I wanted to do like something funky, but I didn't think that I would do anything with it. What I really thought is that I'd eventually write novels. And I still think that. I still think that I will write novels. Um, but I got out of college. I was teaching. I was not happy. I was like, what am I supposed to do? Why do I not feel good? And I heard meditation was a thing. So that was the first thing that I did to be with myself. And then it turned into yoga, and then it became being a yoga teacher, and then it became a million things. It became like, what is acupuncture? And like, what if I did like a sensory deprivation tank and I like float, and like I'm literally with nothing. It's just me like back in a fetus, like, back in the womb. And then there's a million other things. I love being in nature. I don't know. There's so many ways to be with yourself. I have like a thousand. But I also love being with my kids. We have so much fun. They remind me that everyone's an artist, right? They remind me that there's something that they have that we lost. Maybe not all of us, some of us, me for certain. And I've been creative my whole life. It's not like I really, really, really lost it, you know, but I think I don't create like my 4-year old does, you know. I don't like try and paint the walls like my 2-year old. Like, why not? Like, let's paint the walls, right?
Yeah.
And so I love being with them because that in itself is a spiritual journey. That in itself is a lesson. That in itself is a way to be with myself in a different version, because they're not me, but they're kind of me, and that's super interesting. So I think like finding all these ways to get back to the inside of us is what I love to do. And a lot of that is writing poetry for me. I mean, good things happen, I write poetry. Bad things happen, I write poetry. Stuff I'm not even sure if it's good or bad yet, which is probably most things. Like I write poetry. And the feeling of doing it feels so much like touching God. Feels so much like creativity is spirituality, and spirituality is creativity, right? Like, and I'm not talking about like the God that we all talk about, the Christian God, the Jewish God. Now I'm talking about like something else, like my God, like your God, and like that guy's God over there. Like everybody has like their own experience of it. And the more and more I write, the more I'm with my kids, the more I'm with myself, the more I'm like, ooh, Emily Fletcher, who does Ziva meditation, which is not how I learned meditation, but anyway, she's awesome. She has this thing she says all the time that is like, there's only one thing and we're all it. And I love that because I'm like, yeah, poetry is me and is my kids. And I am so in so many ways, my husband and my husband's me and my nieces and nephews and the trees and the earth. And like in so many ways, like just the more I live, the more I can like, that feels true for me. And so like diving into all that is so delicious. And yeah, and like turning off the TV and like running outside and like it's summer, so we're like doing a lot of ripping our clothes off and running through the sprinklers, like old school style. And I just love that. So yeah, that's a long answer to your short question.
Beautiful answer to my question, and so many points there that I would love to revisit. But one of the things, actually, yeah, one of the things is I love how you said I've been creative my whole life,
Hmm.
because so many times when I talk to people, or like myself, like I don't resonate with that. I don't feel like
Mm,
I've been creative my whole life.
hmm.
Although obviously there is a part that knows, but there was a
Hmm.
learning to be creative. Like I would always be
Hmm.
like, I wish I was creative. I wish I could
Mm,
be.
hmm.
Um, until like a few years ago it hit and I was like, wait, everyone's creative. Like we're
Hmm.
co-creating our lives every single day.
Hmm.
So how could we not be creative?
Yeah, but let's talk about that because even though I've always been creative, which bless my mother for always championing me. I mean, signing me up for painting classes to this day. She comes every Wednesday to hang out with my kids and me and play. And she's Graham and it's the best. And every single time she goes, so what are you making? What are you painting? What are you writing? I mean, every single time. Right now, okay, so I grew up painting. That was like my favorite. But sketching and etching and all the things, but it was like much more of like a tactile. But I had journals my whole life long. In fact, when I just went back to her house, I found journals in the like little nightstand next to my bed. And then we went on this like epic journey to go and find like all of my journals. And I had journals from middle school and high school and journals like how every day like when you enter your classroom, it's like there's a journal prompt. Like one of
Yeah.
my teachers like bound all of them. And I have this like from when I was 11 all these questions I would never have written about myself if I had like had my own journal. I wouldn't have been writing. One of them was like, like who's your hero? Like I wouldn't be writing that in my journal. I would just be writing like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I had
This is
BO
what happened
today, or like
today.
or like yeah, I don't
Exactly.
know, like I got embarrassed or like whatever. Um so I always was writing, but writing was not, I didn't think of it like creating. Like when I was painting, I was dropping into this thing that I just explained that I couldn't explain back then. Like I just dropped in, just the world disappeared. It was like the opposite of numbing out. It was like feeling in, right? Like it was so good and delicious. And I would just get lost there. And it was the best. It was like I would get found there. Maybe that's a better way to say it, because I wasn't lost. I was like so there. Um, but the writing was not creative. The writing was like because, and I wrote over and over in my journal, nobody understands me. Nobody listens to me. So I was telling my journal because I had to tell somebody, right? And not until later when I was in high school, I wanted to be a journalist. But then when I got to college, I was like, oh, I don't think that's a hard world. It's media. I just don't think that's me. So I was like, I'm gonna write books because I've always wanted to write books. So I majored in fiction, but I had this really terrible teacher. Oh, she was so mean. She gave us an assignment and we had to read it aloud to the class. And when I did, she was like, you did the assignment wrong. This is not what I asked for and it's bad. And I like left class crying. And I went back to my friend who was also a writer and he was like, take a poetry class. Because I was like, I'm done. I'm gonna take like critical studies, which is like where you read and you're like a critic, but you're not actually writing, right? Which was such a cop out. And thank God for this person who was like, no, like come take a poetry class. And I was like, okay, like why? I mean, but I had been writing poetry in my journals, but there was something that disconnected me from that being relevant or important or worthy or whatever. I'm paying like so much for this college education to go major in poetry. But like I did, I don't know. I've been a rebel since day one, apparently. So I was like, I'm gonna do it. And I loved it. I loved going to class. I never ever again had a teacher that didn't cherish human beings, right? Like nobody was mean to me. Everything was like, okay, well, that's your poem. Okay, that's your version of a poem. How can we get some imagery? How can we get some emotion? Not like it's bad, where I think like we can read a novel and be like, that was bad. You don't really read a poem and go, that's bad. It's like that's that person's art. That's that person's art. I don't know. It just felt so awesome.
Yeah.
So no, I've always been creative, but I had to learn kind of how to be a poet. And I took a very classical approach, right? I learned like this is a simile and a metaphor, and this is a pontoon, and this is um I don't know, a couplet. I don't even remember all the things because I don't use them anymore. But I learned all the rules and then I broke all the rules and it was the best. But I don't know, I wasn't. And then okay, so then now here's what I was gonna say the whole thing is that I wrote a children's book. I just like got out of a meditation. It just all came out. It was like perfect. It was like divinely inspired. I was like, I love it. And I was looking for an illustrator who can illustrate for me. I need, the pictures are so important, right? Especially in a children's book, in a picture book. And I go away for a couple of days to Ojai on this like mom alone solo retreat thing. Just me on my own retreat, made my own weekend. And I had a like, bam, like a slap from the universe, but like in the best way. That was like, you have to do it yourself. You need to paint the pictures. And I was like, oh, like F word. How am I going to do that? And the universe was like, you're a painter. And I was like, but I'm not a painter. I haven't been a painter since I was like 12. And the universe was like, that's the directive. And I'm like, okay. So I come home. I tell my friend who's like a trained artist, like, what am I supposed to do? And she was like, you learn how to paint again. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, God. So for Christmas, I asked my mom, can you get me some watercolors? She was like, of course, because she's my number one fan. I've got watercolors and I'm just playing with them and I'm relearning. So I think like there is learning through the whole thing. And like later, like I really want to make quilts. I don't know why. Like one day I'm going to learn how to make quilts. I want to sew. There's so many ways to be creative that I don't even know about yet.
Yes.
But that I'm going to learn about.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's beauty in the process of uncovering it, learning it.
Always.
But sometimes it's work. And sometimes it's sit down and write. It's
Most
not
of the
always
time it's work.
divine. Yeah, and it's not always divine. But the older I become, the better connected I am, the more grace I give myself, the more I turn off the TV and close the phone. And like I have a rule, no phones in the bathtub. Like I can't be scrolling on my phone. Like, no, no, no. That's like sacred time. And the more time I have unplugged, the more divine hits I get, right? The more it comes all in one piece and I don't have to labor over it. Yeah. So it's like the clearer I can be, the clearer of a channel I can be, sort of like the more creativity is like, hi, you look ready. And I'm like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
But sometimes like when I'm really wrapped up in my stuff and I'm like, oh, and I'm like white knuckling it, the universe is like, you are not ready for this. We're going to go to someone else. And I'm like, no.
It's
so you
like,
have to make
sorry, it's like that book, Big Magic. Have you
Big
read that?
Magic. Yes, absolutely. Big Magic. So Elizabeth Gilbert tells the story about, I can't remember which poet it is, but a poet that lived on a farm and she's out in the field and she feels a poem like coming to her. And she's like, ah, I'm in the field. Like I have to go get to my pen and paper. So she drops whatever she's picking in the field, runs as fast as possible to the house. I mean, trying to outrun the poem, right? The poem is sweeping across the land and she's trying to outrun it. And she gets into her house, she gets the paper and she grabs the poem and she pulls it in backwards and writes the whole thing down backwards. And I get chills every time because that is like so it. That's so it.
Yeah.
And I just love that.
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember her name, but I just love that. It's like the poem, and the poem's like, okay, if you're not ready, then I'm going to someone down the street.
Absolutely.
And that's why she explains like so many people have similar ideas and they'll be like, oh my God, I was going to write that book.
Yeah.
And creativity is like, I gave you that idea, but you didn't use it.
Yeah. You
And
sat on it for too long.
Right. And all creativity wants to do, all consciousness wants to do is just experience itself.
Yeah.
So it's like, it wants to come alive. It's going to find someone.
Mhm.
who's sitting in the bathtub, not on their phone, who's got some time to receive it, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And that's why your poetry is also just so potent and so like when I read your poetry, I wouldn't have been able to tell, but I can tell that you studied poetry. Do you know what I mean? It has a
Mm,
different texture. It has a different, like your words have a different texture. The way they come after each other have a different texture. Um, yeah, it's just something I notice in your words. And I guess a question to that would be, what do you think helped by learning? So you said you learned poetry in college and you
right.
learned all the rules and you broke all the rules, but what are the
Hmm.
rules that actually mattered that you
Mm.
kept?
So I think the best thing about studying poetry with other people is two things. One, I had to read an enormous amount of poetry. Like I mean, I could show you. There's in the other room. Just like huge books, like the Norton anthologies, right? And we would just go reading through like Adrienne Rich and like you know Billy Collins and like all these like classical canon poets. Also Shakespeare. I mean, I took a whole class on Shakespeare. I mean, all of those things. You learn to read a lot, and that's the best training for any writer, especially like, which is so hard if you were gonna write fiction, is you need to be reading books all the time. You need to be reading like 2 books a week. You need to be reading good books, bad books, medium books, like all of the books, right? And so that's why poetry can be more accessible because you can sit down and read 10 poems in one sitting and be like, ooh, interesting, and kind of like feel that writer in a more immediate way than if you're writing a whole novel. Sometimes you have to read the whole thing before you get the gist, the point, right? And you read a whole poem and it is complete, right? So the first thing is reading as much as possible. And I don't mean just people on Instagram. Like you need to go read the people who had to publish the hard way because they had to jump through so many hoops. They had to be so good. People had to find them in the basements of bookstores and in bars and like out in Haight Ashbury. They had to find them and then they had to convince them to print things on paper. It's like you had to find those people too. The second thing that was really great about my education and poetry was being around poets, right? And just being having the permission slip to like go write a poem or go read your poem out loud. And like being in that space was amazing. And that is what's really interesting and awesome about what Chelsea did on June 1st to get us all together. Because in a way, I mean, my life has been crazy since then. I feel like she like opened a portal of something. We all like combined juices, sort of like we all combined energy and to walk into a room and be like, there's 200 other poets in this room, not just poets, women poets, female poets, poets that previously would have been anonymous, right? Like those poets, not just like, you know, the man poets, the dudes. It's like there's all these women poets, and like seeing that is another permission slip, right? It's like, wow, I could be a poet. All these people are claiming to be poets. One of my earliest best poems I wrote, I mean, they used to be like nuggets, right? They used to be so short, was it was called How to Be a Poet. And it said, pick up a pen and begin. Oh, call yourself a poet, pick up a pen and begin. And that was like, to me, it's like, well, I was so like, can I even be a poet? Like, what does that mean? People make fun of me. Like, and then I'm a mom, which is like a serious thing. But then I'm a poet, which is like a silly thing. And it's like, that actually is so wrong. Being a mom is a silly thing and a serious thing. And being a poet is a serious thing and a silly thing. Like, it's just, but I had to give myself permission. So that's one of the best things about being educated. As far
Yes.
as like learning the terms of things, I feel like I don't know. I know a lot of them, but I don't necessarily use a lot of them. Like I think like alliteration is fun when you're using the same consonant sound over and over. Like, you know, Polly picked purple potatoes. I don't know, like the or like and you could do it with any letter. And then of course you learn like the classic forms of poems, but like we don't really use those anymore, which is okay. You can, and I've written poems like that, but I feel like they're trapping.
Yeah.
They like, I don't want to be trapped anymore. I felt like that so long in my life, so much of my life, you know, by a million different things, you know, society, the church, the way I was supposed to be, get straight A's, write the poem with the rhymes every other line. It has to be a couplet, you know, it has to be A, B, A, B, has to be A, B, C, C, B, A, B. It's like, okay, why?
Mm.
Like,
Wow.
what if we all just like shaved our heads and wrote our poems backwards? Like, you know,
Yes.
except I'm not shaving my head.
We love our hair too
I
much.
would, right, I love my hair, I love my hair. But you know, the idea of that. The other thing that though I think that it was helpful was like asking myself, which I do still use. I'll be writing a poem and then I'll be like, reach for something better.
Mm.
Reach for something truer, right? Like, because I think the best poems are the true ones. Like, there are many poems that I start that I don't finish because I'm not willing to be that honest with myself yet. And that's full disclosure. That's me who just said I love doing the truth shit. Okay. Like sometimes I'm scared of the truth. Like we all are. And sometimes I'm not ready to write it out. I'm not ready I'm not ready to publish. A lot of my poems are not in my book because some of them are just for me. Right.
Yeah.
I don't really write for other people. I really write to understand life and myself. And when I ask myself, do better, level up, choose something more true. That is something I learned when I was studying poetry. And I'm not sure it was from the teacher or from my peers or from myself, because I would read these other people's poems and I'd be like, that is so awesome. How come I didn't write that? So then I would be writing my poems and be like, no, truer, realer, deeper, grungier,
Yeah.
closer to the shaved head, you know?
Yes. Okay. I love that piece about reading more because
hmm
I definitely didn't study poetry. I studied marketing, and marketing is pretty far from poetry. But similar to you, I had journals my whole life, and unfortunately, I didn't have a teacher that gave me really awesome
hmm
prompts. So I was writing like, "Oh my God, my brother is mad at me again, boo-hoo," right? And
Yes.
then it turned, and then it turned, and then it turned, and
hmm
then finally, like what, 6-ish years ago, it finally became like deeper life stuff and
Mm,
real stuff and God stuff and universe stuff and creative stuff. And then
hmm
I was like, oh wow, this is what journaling is. Like that was what journaling was
mm,
when I was a kid, but this is what journaling is as a grown up.
right.
And having that as a tool is so cool. I don't know how I got there, but what I wanted to say was the importance of reading. Oh, I said I didn't study poetry, but the importance of reading, I feel that because I wrote properly my first poem after reading Mary Oliver. And
Mm,
I saw a line that she said, I don't want to leave this world having simply visited, something like that. And I
mm,
wrote an after poem because I was like,
yes.
wow, wow. And then I read Sylvia Plath very recently.
Yeah.
And when you read someone like that, you realize, like, no, truer, no, even truer,
Truer.
but true, but in such a sly way. Like, it's
Right.
like Sylvia Plath wrote a line which I cannot pull out of my mind, which is, what are you, a communion wafer? And I saw it in Patti
Love.
Smith's book, and I was like, oh my God, I know where this came from. And just to know, to know that you know
Mm-hmm.
where poetry
Mm-hmm.
comes from, it's such a cool feeling to be like, oh, I read the book that this was originally mentioned in, and now I
Yep.
see it as a reference, and now I get to
Right.
use it as a reference. But having
Right.
all of these books by creative people is so cool. First thing. Second thing, how I wish I got to go to that event. But life took 100 turns on me. However,
Yeah.
even if I didn't get to the event, I feel like something shifted for me as
Mm,
well,
mm-hmm.
even though I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't there because I am part of the community, right? And
Right.
so just like being in contact with all of you and my inbox, oh my God, my inbox is the most magical place it's been since
Yep.
I
Yep.
created my Instagram because of all of these poems empower women. Like
Right.
the depth is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely mind blowing. So I totally resonate as well with the importance of having poets or
Mm-hmm.
creatives around. And
Yep.
the next thing I want to jump into, but I want to say something before that. But the next thing I want to jump into is how um, I mean, everyone is a creative, right? And there
Right.
are different ways to talk about our creativity. There are different ways to indulge in our creativity, and a lot of times we don't even know that it is creativity that we're indulging in. So that's something I want to go really deep into.
Okay.
However, in the beginning, you said everyone has their own God, and
Mm,
I've never heard that. I mean, we know that, but we don't really hear it said like that. And it has me thinking about how, sure, like, let's say, the people that go to church believe in Jesus Christ and in what they see. And then the people that go to the temple, like I'm Hindu, and people that go to the Hindu temple believe in those gods. And the people that believe in Islam believe in Allah and all of these things. However, everyone still has their own
mhm,
version of that same
mhm,
entity in their
mhm,
mind.
mhm,
Um, and I don't know, that's just such a cool concept that everyone has
mhm.
their own God. And at the same time, we get to express our own gods.
Right.
And we express our own gods through art, I feel like.
Right. I completely agree. And I think that, it's like reading a book and there's no movie, right? And you have to just in your mind think about who they are. It's like that if the whole world was reading this like, book of God, we're experiencing like consciousness, God, it, her, him, all of the names that you just mentioned. And we get to have our own relationship with them. And when you were talking, the thing I kept thinking about was like, my relationship with God has changed so much just in my lifetime, right? Like when I was younger, God was like very much like Santa Claus, right? Like he sat on a chair and he judged if you were good or bad. And he was like my dad. And then Jesus was like my brother, right? Like he was like the cooler God who was like kind of cool and we could talk and like, he was more accessible, right? And then I got older and I went to Catholic school. And then God became like angry and mean. And I got kind of scared of God. Before God was the more loving. And then God got kind of scary. And then a million things happened. My parents divorced. I got to college. I was drinking too much. I mean, so many things happened where I was just like, done. Whatever I believed in was wrong. It's not real. It doesn't feel real anymore. And I was like, God's not real. And I went into this period of like maybe 3 years of just kind of like dark, like kind of like radio silence, right? Where I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing, but that's when I started writing poetry. So that's really interesting. I actually haven't thought of that before. When I was like, okay, God's out, then poetry kind of came in. And then when I got older and I was like, I'm not happy. I need to meditate. I did it every day for a year. And then I was like, I love this. I went to my first yoga class and I moved to a new city. I didn't know anyone. The yoga owner's mom was like my first friend in the town. She was like so great. And I was like, God, I love these people. Like, this is great. And I would go to yoga and I would feel something that felt like kind of like the way I would talk to Jesus in bed before I fell asleep. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And I kind of just was like, well, I'm just going to keep coming. So I would keep coming and keep coming. And then I would be like, oh, I feel good when I'm here. There's something about this that feels mm, good, like juicy, deep, something like heavy, like, ooh, like, I don't know, it felt like gravitas. Right. So then I was like, I have to do yoga teacher training. And I did not intend to teach. I was like, I just want to learn more. I know there are texts. Can I read some texts? Like, I want to learn about all the things. And that's when we started reading like the Bhagavad Gita and all the Vedas and all of these things. And I was like, oh my God, I get it. I was like, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. There's truth in all of them, right? There's truth in my Santa God. There's truth in Jesus, my homie brother. There's truth in yoga finding something, I don't know what it was, consciousness, that, then there's truth. And then like it continued to evolve until I became a mom. And then I was like, oh my good God, goddess, almighty, heaven on earth, I am making life. This child exists because of my body. And I don't know how I'm doing it. I'm not, I didn't, I mean, I read a book, I don't know, but like, just because you read a book about fingernails come when you're in like week 12 or something doesn't mean that I know how to do it. My body just knew how to do it. And I was like, my body's like making a life. Like, that makes me a god. I mean, in my mind, I couldn't get that thought out of my head. I mean, co creation at its absolute most physical level, right? And I felt amazing. I mean, yes, you vomit a lot and it's a whole thing, but I felt this like closeness to God that I never felt before. I felt so good. I felt so empowered. I felt so I don't know, worthy, I guess, when I was like carrying that baby, right? And then you birth the baby, and my story is really intense. And like it was a whole thing, and it was hard. And the portal for anyone, it's hard. Giving birth is hard for everyone. I had a particularly awesome experience. It was so hard, and walking through that portal changed me. And holding your child like changes you. And you look at that baby and you're like, I can't even breathe. I can't believe I made that. And I have to take care of that. And I was like 29. And I was like, I think I'm a grown up. I'm 29. And then I was holding this like perfect little beautiful creature that I made. And I was like, I, I don't, I can't breathe anymore. Like, how am I supposed to do this? Like, the love is like exploding me. Like, it cannot be held inside my skin anymore. Like, it's flabbergasting. Right. And then I was like holding her thinking, God, she's perfect. There's not a thing wrong about her. Every single thing about her is perfect. And then you think, well, I was like that. My brother was like that. My mother was like that. My great grandmother, my great grandfather, every single person on earth, every friend I've ever known, every enemy I've ever known. I don't really have any enemies, but like, I don't know, everybody.
Yeah.
Perfect, divine, just straight out of the portal of the other side. And then you're like, well, if my baby's perfect, I kept asking this question, well, when does she stop being perfect? Is it like, and I would ask everybody I knew. I'd ask all the parents that like had older kids than me, when did your kids stop being like perfect? And they'd be like, they'd always have an answer. Oh, when they were like 5, or oh, the terrible twos, or as soon as they became a teenager, whatever their answer was. And I was like, I don't think that's right. I think the answer's never. And the answer's never, never, never. We're always having that like divine juice, right? So then I was like, well, which was a stretch for me, because I was really far from self-love, really far from feeling good about myself, really far from being like, I'm a good person. I'm just like a big old mess. I make all these mistakes. I'm not good. I had so much trauma and ugh and ugh and ugh. So I was like, well, if she's gonna be good when she's 29, doesn't that mean that I'm still good? That it's still in there somewhere? Maybe I just put a bunch of crap on top, and a bunch of other people put crap on top, and society put crap on top. And what if I just like kind of scooted it off, layer by layer? Sometimes with a bulldozer, sometimes with a spoon. Like I'm just clearing it off. Sometimes I get some Windex, I try to make it clear. Like just getting that junk off, and then it's like, wow, if you do that, then I think everybody really is just good, right? And good people. I don't mean like, oh, I'm good because like I like went and volunteered. Like I don't mean good like the way that we think of good. Good as in just like
Inherently
water in
good.
a right, water in a river. I mean, water in a river is good. Trees are good. Right? You don't look at a tree and go, that's a bad tree. Like that tree's
Yeah.
just good. It's a tree.
Yeah.
We're like that.
Mm.
We muddle it up. We confuse it. We shove it down. Same with everyone being an artist, right? Everyone
Yeah.
is, but we confuse it. We muddle it. We cover it. We have all these reasons, valid and non-valid, logical and not logical, that makes sense. Like, well, that's just silly. Or, oh, I grow up. And I think there's sort of always this journey of like forgetting and remembering. And that is why having a kid is so mind blowing, heart blowing, soul blowing, because you remember, oh my God, I just started to take myself real seriously, real seriously. And then I remembered I can just like, take my clothes off and run around in the sprinkler. I mean, I remember I can throw myself down onto the ground and just scream and feel really validated in it. Like, you're
Yeah.
like, I forgot. I can do that. And that kid's still good.
Yeah.
Still good for screaming on the floor. I mean, literally today, not a joke. My daughter has a loose tooth. My son smacked her in the face. He's 2.
Oh no.
And her tooth flew out. Okay. flew out of her mouth. She's like half laughing and half bleeding and like, what
Oh
the
no.
heck just happened? Right. And I'm like, but that kid's still good. I mean, he didn't even know what he's just being a 2 year old. I'm like, wait, and still good, you know? And I think so much of us are taught like that we're not good, or that, original sin, oh, the worst thing ever. I think that's the worst thing ever to teach people. Like, sin's just in you. You just got it. And I think Mary Magdalene was the one that said that sin's not real. And I think that's no wonder they told her not. They silenced that. Because what if we didn't believe that? What if we believed that there was no sin? What if we just believed like that we were good, because good people treat each other well? Good people treat the earth well. Good people love each other because they understand you can make mistakes and still be good, which is just such a
Yeah.
lesson for me. I literally was just talking to my husband about it. I was like, he's like, we're just making mistakes and we're just learning. And I go, yeah, I just really, really don't like making any. He goes, well, then how can we learn? And I go, logically, I understand that. But like in the moment, it's so, uh, you know, and if we can teach our kids, the next generation, the next, all the generations, yeah, that's how you learn. Make mistakes. You're so good. You know, I just think we'll have a lot less violence. I think we'll have a lot more kindness. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's not the question you asked me, but that's where it went in my
That's
heart, in
okay.
my
That's
mind.
okay. Wherever it goes is perfectly perfect. So something that has me thinking about, well, since you brought up sin, I'm thinking about how
Mm,
something that just snapped in is, what if instead of being forced to go to confession and tell your sins to a priest, you were forced to go to confession with yourself and tell your sins to
mm,
yourself,
mhm,
and write them in poems?
mm,
How much more embodied, integrated, aware of
right,
ourselves would we be, rather than being like, go to a priest
right.
and talk about it and say prayers? Um, and you're saying the prayers, but you don't know what you're apologizing for because you're saying prayers.
Or, or you don't really know why it's wrong. Since I was K-8 Christian school and then high school Catholic, I have a very interesting view of both. And my mom was Christian, my dad was Catholic. So and it's like they're same, but they're not. In a way, like the break of the Catholic Church into the Christian Church was Henry VIII, because he wanted a son, and his wife Queen Catherine was not giving him a son. So, and he couldn't get a divorce. The Pope said, "No, you can't get a divorce over that. That's ridiculous. Like, you're being rude. Like, it's probably because you have syphilis." And he was like, no, 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 I'm making a whole new church. So he made the Church of England, which then there's all these sects. And Martin Luther was the one that said people should have access to the word of God. By then, in 15, whatever, it was so diluted. It was not what Mary Magdalene had said, right? But it was still the idea being, take out the priest, take out the confession, let people read God's word and talk to him. Back then, him. I think it's her for me. But, you know, taking that out. And then, like, even further than that, like, what if, and this is dangerous because we want people to be healthy when they're doing this, but like, what if we meditate and then, like, we hear God talk to us, right? Not people who are really, really hurting, because then they can convince themselves that God's telling them anything. And that's hard. And I think that's why religion exists, so that we have a moral code and we can find some camaraderie in it. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I think that there are ways in which women are marginalized, but the point being, like, it is more about us finding our way back to communicating with ourselves. Because if we can tell our sins to ourselves and not a priest, then we might not be so afraid of ourselves, right? Like, I was literally telling Chelsea yesterday, like, man, I'm like, sometimes I'm afraid of myself. Like, and she's like, what's wrong with that? And I'm like, okay, okay, okay. We're allowed to be afraid. Okay. And most of it for me is that permission to be like, oh, I feel like, you're like, how was your day today? I was like, it was everywhere. It was so many things. It was up and down and all around. And so much of my lesson right now is being okay with that. I don't always have to be happy. I don't always have to be peaceful. Sometimes I am like 10 different things in one day. And maybe that's okay. And maybe I don't need to be afraid of that. Maybe I don't need to be afraid of making mistakes. Maybe I don't need to be afraid of my like sins, right? Maybe I'm still good.
I feel like I just
Okay.
went to church is what I just said. But
Yes.
I wrote down two prompts based on what you said, which were just
Okay.
mind blowing. And I wonder what a poem like this would look like. So for anyone listening, if you want to
Please
write
write it.
this
Please
poem
write it.
after Kimmery Moss, please write it. Um, the first one is I would talk to Jesus in bed. I
Ooh, I
love
did.
that.
Well,
I
Chelsea
love
has a
that.
poem called Jesus is So Hot, which I like
Yeah.
love. I haven't written
So
that one
good.
yet. But yes, I would
So
talk to
good.
Jesus in bed every night, every single night.
That's such an amazing prompt because it could go so many ways. And then the second one is Jesus is my homie brother. That was
He
so
is. I
good.
don't know. That just flew out of my mouth, but it's just so true. It's just, he was so much more accessible to me. And now I think of God like the mother, right? Going through that. And I'm like, ooh, I mean, we thought that like God was this powerful man. And then like, I'm telling you, I love men. We need them. But I'm in this delivery room and no one can help. I mean, it's me.
Yeah.
And that was kind of mind blowing to me. And to be in there and to be like, my mother did this, my grandmother did this. All of the women that I know that have had children have done this. It's like, whoa. I don't know. It just opened a whole portal to me that was like, I think that I have been thinking about this all wrong. I think that I have been thinking, as I was told, that girls are. I wouldn't even say the word women. I was like afraid of that. I was still a girl back then, right? Like girls were nice and they were smart and they were good, but not like just good. They were just like good, like
Good
you know what
girls.
I'm talking about. Just yeah, like you just did everything you were supposed to do, and
Yeah.
you were cute, and you were little, right? And you didn't step out of line, right? And then you like try to give birth, and you're like, oh, you're yelling. I mean, you were having this primal experience that connects you back to like, actually, I think women are so much more than we were told, right? And I think it's sort of silly to say that God is a woman or a man. God is neither. God is both. God is so all encompassing. God is more than Jesus homeboy, more than Allah, more than consciousness itself, more than a black hole. It's like it's everything. When I did yoga teacher training, they would always tell this story about how somebody would be they taught like obviously several groups of people, and in one of the previous groups, somebody was like, "Oh my God, I get it." And they were like, what do you get? Like, tell us, like, what did you just like have come to you? And he was like, I'm the toilet. And they were like, what? And they were like, if it's consciousness and everything's consciousness, then I am the toilet and the toilet is me. And the tree and the earth and the river and the newborn baby and my uncle and the chair and the phone that we're talking. I mean, everything. And it was like, oh my God, epic.
Yes.
I am the toilet and the toilet is me.
Yes.
Right.
Another
And
poetry
it's
prompt.
right. Right. And it just yeah, and I think just getting to that place, I think that's where we're going. Right. And now I'm kind of off the poetry, but it is still the poetry to me somehow. I think so many people are finding this new version of God and expressing it through art and finding it through art and finding it through birth. I mean, I think finding it through holding new babies. I mean, finding it through reparenting themselves. I mean, so much of this is all, I mean, it's the same. It's everything's connected. I mean, all of it's the toilet and the toilet's all of it. Like, and in a way, there's this thread that runs through everything, right? That's like, I don't know, I found myself and then I was like more like God, or I found God and then I understood myself. And then I wrote a poem and I felt like God. And then I held my child and I realized that's God. And I don't know, I say God and that makes people uncomfortable, especially if they're in the period of time that I was in where I was like, we're done. Tap out. No, this is not good. It doesn't make me feel good about myself. I feel like a sinner. I'm bad, blah, blah, blah. And I totally respect that. So call it whatever you want. Call it the mother. Lately I've been calling it great mother. Whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, call it whatever you want. Okay, so what would you say to people that are not expressing themselves
Mm,
because they don't feel creative or because they're afraid of their power or
Mm,
because they're afraid of making a mistake?
mm. Okay. Different assignments for each of those. Okay. For people who are afraid of making a mistake, I would tell them to go make mistakes on purpose. I would say, like, where can you get out of line? Right? You know the line, you know the rules. Write down 5 rules and then break them. Break one rule a week and just sit with it. Just be with it. Like, go into the room and say the thing you weren't supposed to say. Not mean, don't be mean, but like, be on it. Or like, maybe someone's like, hey, can you do this? And you're like, that's a no. But I always say yes. Like, say no. Like, and it doesn't have to be with art. Like, you don't have to make a mistake with, or quote unquote mistake with art, because I'm not sure there are mistakes with art. But like, go make some mistakes in life. Go, like, I don't know, sell your shit and move somewhere. I mean, that's not obviously for the moms I'm talking to. We got things to do. But like, like, do something a little radical. Like, go sign up for something. Like, I don't know, go make a mistake. I would say go do that on purpose. When it comes to art, I would say, like, when maybe this is comforting to those people, is like, for how many poems are in here? I mean, I've written at least this many that aren't in here, that I don't feel awesome about, that I don't, or that I don't, I don't know, I don't think have the juice, right? It's not about that they're bad. It's about that these ones made me feel something, right? And not all art makes you feel something. And I don't think that makes it less true or less good, but it makes it less like energetically charged, if that makes sense. So for everyone who's like, well, I've made bad art, I've made tons of bad art. In fact, when I was looking for all the journals with my mom, she saved so much crappy art. I mean, there's so much. It was awesome. One time I did this like clay thing, which I didn't know how to do clay at all. I just signed up for it because it was an elective and I wanted to do something creative. And I took way too many AP classes and I was like, I have got to do something else. So I took this like clay sculpting class and I made Jackie Onassis. Like, I made her like bust, like her head. Oh, it looks so bad. She is like rolling up there laughing, being like, you made me. Like, her face is kind of fat and she's got like, it's so bad. And my mom has kept it all these years. It's like sitting up on like one of her dresser things. And like, it's bad. And it's like, it's okay to make bad stuff, right? Make some bad stuff. Eventually you write a good thing. One of the best assignments I ever got from a poetry professor was give yourself permission to write a bad poem every day. Just sit down and say, I'm going to write a shitty poem. Every once in a while, it won't be shitty.
Yeah.
Right? Every once in a while, you'll say, truer, deeper, say it. It's in there, just, and you don't want to. There's like a feeling where you're like, I don't know. And then you're like, what if someone reads it? No, 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 no. So many of my poems, so many of the things that I posted, I'm like, I can never post this. I give myself full permission. This is not for anyone's eyes. And then I write it. And then I'm like, I actually fucking love it. And then I post it. Yeah. But I have to tell myself still to this day, yesterday, when I'm writing a poem, no one's going to see this. This is literally for me. The other thing that I would say is that you have to sort of like let it breathe. You have to let it move, right? Like, that's why I don't like the structures anymore. Like, all the it has to be rhyme scheme, ABAB, like, because if you write the first line and the first line is, I talked to Jesus in bed, and then it starts going a little like, ooh, it starts going over there. You're like, don't reel it in. Go, baby. It's like, it's going somewhere weird. Take it. Like, write it. Like, get on it and be like, okay, we're going, and like, make it sensual, right? Like, make it like when you're having like this journey and you're with someone else, like, you're not in control. You're kind of like flowing with it. You're moving with it, and like, let the poem go and let it say what it wants to say. Maybe you rip it up. Maybe you delete the note. Maybe you never show anybody, or maybe it's the truest thing you ever wrote. And that's the same advice I would give for someone who's afraid of themselves. Of course, you're afraid of yourself. You have no idea what you are. I have no idea what I am, right? We have such limited imaginations. The fact that we're even talking about God, I don't know, some aliens, some other consciousness up there is like laughing at us, being like, you have made it so small. You've made it so black and white. You've made it so whatever we've made it. We don't even know we've made it because we think we have this grand idea. And we know this much. We know this much about ourselves. And we look at these other people and we judge them and we're like, we have no idea what's inside of them. Right. This is also a journey that I'm learning a lot. It's like, older people, my mother, the way we were parented, the way other people are parenting near me. It's like, we have no idea. We're just trying with the very limited amount of information that we even have about ourselves. Right. And like our kids, like I think this all the time, like there's going to be a time where like, I don't really know everything about my kid. Right now, I kind of do. She's little. He's little. But, like she's having a whole world inside her that, she's going to be 13 one day writing these journals and I'm going to have no idea what's in them. And that's amazing. Like what a journey. So of course you should be afraid of yourself. You don't even know what you are. But you should also be proud of yourself. You should also be like, turned on by yourself. You should also be like, I don't know, excited, exhilarated by yourself. Maybe afraid to. That's okay.
Yeah. And fear is just what is that? Fear is just power disguised.
Ooh, love that. Okay, need to write it down. You, I don't have a pen. I have a pen. I have a pen all the times in my life. Okay, you remind me that you said that. Fear is just power disguised.
And I pulled this out. I wrote this down after Chelsea said it because I was like, wow. So one time in one of the poetry videos, she said the poem and poet are the lovers. They are
Mm,
collaborators. It's a surprise where they're going. And
right.
so when you said let it go where it needs to go, that's what came back to me because like every single creative says, I don't like being in a box. I'm not in a box.
Mm,
I'm multidimensional. And
mm-hmm.
so, just the way you're saying, like, if you're forcing yourself to structure it in a certain way, then all of a sudden you don't feel multidimensional. And all of a sudden you
Right.
do feel like you're in a box. And I think brains are such funny things because when we're not consistent with our messaging with ourselves, our brains are also like, oh, I'm good. Oh, I'm not good. Oh, I'm good. Oh, I'm not good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can write. Oh, I can't write. Or, oh, I'm really good at this. Oh, I suck at this. Like it's the dual experience of being on planet Earth, right? And what
Right.
makes our brains different from anything else on planet Earth. Obviously, we can talk about like God, which is all encompassing and everything, and the only thing
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
that isn't included in the duality of everything. But otherwise, like brains are such I mean neuroplasticity, right? They're
Right.
such trainable things, but we're not taking advantage of how we are able to train our brains most of the time
Right.
because we're
First of all, we don't use our whole brain. So
yes.
there's so much of our brain we don't understand. That's like we know this much. Okay, we know this much. We don't even know what like dreams are about. Like, which
Yeah.
is so fascinating to me and also a journey that I'm on. But like neuroplasticity, literally a line in my poem is called "Her neuroplasticity is so hot," which is
Mm.
from another Poems and Power from Nicole, woman who I just love, love, love. And it is so interesting, like how we can feel so many things in one day, right? And I love when people say things like they're having an emotion and they're like, look, it's just a bad day. It's not a bad life. Right. Because I can do that too. I can catastrophize like the best of them. I mean, I can make that an Olympic sport. Right. But then even smaller than that, it's just like I told you, today was like 17 things, like all over the place. I'm flopping between best ever and super low and I'm all over. And I'm like, okay, this is just not even bad because, nothing's good or bad. We just decide it is, but I'm here, I'm in this vibration, I'm in this feeling, I'm in this thickness or this, visceralness of it. And that's just right now. That's not even a bad day. I don't even want to say I had a bad day. What, like, I had a bad moment or I had a
Exactly.
moment that felt like that. And I had another moment that felt like that. And I had another moment that felt like that. And, you know, if we're honest, which I think is probably an unpopular opinion these days, we don't have to feel the way we feel. Not all of our feelings are true, right?
Mm.
Some feelings are lies. Some feelings were given to us, put on us, and we have to decide, wait, did I come up with that? Like when I was that perfect little baby? Or did someone tell me that? And I just thought, okay, sure, or it was beat into me or whatever. So many feelings aren't true, and there's a huge move right now to like feel your feelings, which is good. You should feel your feelings, but not always believe them, right? There's this great child psychologist that I was just listening to that said, I'll say something unpopular, which is not all feelings are valid. And let me walk you through it. You have a kid, they're 6, you're in a drive-through, you roll down the window, and they say, "Mom, I'm scared to order, like something bad's gonna happen. Like if I order." Okay, like that is a feeling, but it's not true. And if you say to that kid, okay, mommy will do it for you, boom, you just validated their fear. You just told them that their fear is real, that something bad will happen, or their embarrassment is more important or more heavy than their power to overcome it, right? And so it's like it's very hard to nurture this child, ourselves, our children, and say, yes, you should feel your feelings. And then also, like, not all of them are real. And you can feel scared and you can let that take over, or you can take over it, right? There's only one of the two. That's why fear is power in disguise. It's like just hit me like so deep because it is. I think usually fear is a lie unless it's lizard brain, right? Unless it's like saber-toothed tiger coming to eat me. Okay, that's real. But how much of our fear is real? Yeah. So little these days. So much is about what we were conditioned to believe, and I was just talking about this with my husband yesterday. We have a feeling, and then we're like, God, I really shouldn't have that feeling. And then we have shame about the feeling. And so, well, now I got to deal with 2 things. Now I've got the feeling, and then I've got the secondary feeling bad about the feeling, feeling guilty about the feeling, feeling shame about the feeling. And now I've got to unpack both things when I could just say, yeah, I feel scared, and that's okay. Also, it doesn't have to be real. Or I feel angry. That's okay. That one is real. And it takes a lot of learning, practice, honesty to do that, because otherwise every time you're mad at someone, you just fly off the handle, you think it's real. Sometimes it's not justified. Sometimes you're like, wow, that just triggered me for something that wasn't really about them, and I really need to apologize, or I really need to just bring it down. And keeping yourself in check like that is so hard. And teaching other people to do it, teaching your little children to do it, it's so hard because you don't want them to feel suppressed, repressed, which I think is a much easier way to do it, right? Just right. Like so much of, like, I think my and younger, older generations were taught just like zip it up. We don't have time for this, which is a much easier way to do it, but it's not poetry, right? It's not real. It's not true. And that's why so many artists are, Julia Cameron calls them ghosts artists. You used to be an artist and now you're just a ghost of an artist because someone told you to shh. And if you cut off people's feelings, then you cut off their art, right? And you can even make art from feelings that are lies. You can be really afraid of something and write a great poem, make a painting about it. I mean, write a novel about it. Totally. And that's how you kind of find your way through it and kind of discover, oh, that one, I don't have to live with that one forever. I can let that one go.
And every time you go back to that poem, you're like, oh, I remember that feeling, but thank you to this poem for just taking it from me, or that
right.
painting, or that novel, or whatever it is.
Right. And I just wrote a poem about spaghetti, how emotions are like spaghetti, and how, like, you just have to, like, eat them, right? You have to, like, digest them. This is another thing I learned in yoga training, that it's not like letting it go. Like, you're like, just let it go. It's like, well, that's hard.
Yeah.
I don't know. People are like, let it go. And I'm like, I just can't. I don't know. It's sticky. This doesn't come out. And my yoga trainer teacher was like, it's more like digestion. It's more like you put something in your mouth, you chew on it for a while, or something comes in, right? And you chew on it for a while, and then you finally swallow it. And you're like, oh, like sometimes it's hard to swallow. And then it goes through the digestive process, right? It's going down the esophagus, it's in the stomach. It's got to, like, really get, like, eaten up by that acid, right? And then it's going through the large intestine, small intestines, or small and large, I don't know what order. And then, like, you have to release it eventually, but it's not so easy as, like, letting go of a balloon, right? It's more of a whole body process. And we get stuck sometimes with those feelings. We get them stuck in us. And then that's how we get sick and get diseases and get grumpy, grouchy, ornery forever. It's like because we haven't let go, right? That's the easy way to say it, because we haven't digested them,
Yeah.
right? And
You're
we all
speaking
know
my
those people.
language.
Right. And some of us are those people. And
Yeah.
in many ways, like there are still things I'm in such a summer of digestion right now. Just like bowing down to the powers that be, so much to digest. And everyone I know is like going through it too. And it's like, we can do what we were told and just cut it off. It will still be inside us. It will back up, right? Then like, where's it going to go? It's just like, it's not going out. So it's just, and then finally you just explode.
Yeah.
Right. And I've done that. I've lived most of my life like that until I was like, I have to do something different. I can't just like explode.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because if I can clear it, if I can move it through, if I can digest it, if I can be a clear channel, then I can explode art, right? Then I can have the clear channel, then creativity is like, oh, you got space for me. Got it. I'm coming in.
What's interesting is how you said that in yoga teacher training or in yoga, it's about
Mm-hmm.
digesting the emotion and allowing it to go to all these parts inside of you. So I studied embodiment coaching. So
Mm,
I'm an embodiment coach, and what we learn is how obviously it's not about letting it go, it's about embodying it, it's about feeling it.
mm,
But something that I spoke about in the last episode that will be out soon as well is feelings only last 90 seconds, and if it's longer than 90 seconds, then we're prolonging it. So we
mm,
actually have the ability to feel into it so deeply for a minute and a half and then let it go, but we choose, right, to let it sit in here, and then like you said, like it backs up and backs up and backs up, and then it's like uh a kettle on the stove that's like,
mm-hmm.
hey, I've already been like blowing whistles, you're not doing anything about it, now it starts overflowing, and then it
Right.
starts overflowing in all the aspects of our lives. And I love how you said that, like, you want to be a clear vessel to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just
Mm-hmm.
thinking about myself 8 years ago with my huge temper, and I'm sure you can
Mm.
resonate with a huge temper with a double fire big three.
Yep.
But huge temper, and a lot of times it would come from feeling stuck at home because I studied in Boston. I went to college in Boston, then I lived in San Francisco for a year, and then I moved back home, and then I lived at home with my parents and my whole family, and I felt like I was choked, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I all of a sudden all of this freedom that I had was taken away. And then I would have a lot of anger come up, and I would talk to my then boyfriend, now husband, about it. And a lot of times we would have explosions with each other. And I was like, oh, I
Absolutely.
mean, and now I've realized, like, oh, it wasn't him. It wasn't my family, but it was all of it building up. And like, when it's all building up, how are we expecting ourselves to create? Like, there's no
Well, and you know what's
space.
amazing is that creating can empty it,
Exactly.
right? It's like, you kind of, maybe this is for the people that are scared to write bad things or make bad art. It's like, make bad art. You need to make space for good stuff, right? Like, make a lot of bad art. Make, just like, vomit it, explode it out. For me, I'm always thinking volcanoes, and like, it's fire, fire, fire. It's like, just spew it everywhere.
Yeah.
And then maybe you're like, oh, there's like a new sprout coming out of the lava. And like, that's like the island of Maui or something, like, it, like, something comes out of that, but you have to let it out. And that's why, and I think my friend and I were talking about this a while back. And it was like, she was like, talking about our childhoods and really being like the misunderstood or the not listened to, that kind of thing. And she was like, thank God that happened to me. And I'm like, what? And she's like, then I never would have found painting. She's a painter. Then I wouldn't have loved it so much. And I'm like, boom, that's me writing. That's me writing. And thank God I was misunderstood. Right. And like, was I misunderstood because I was different, or was I different because I was misunderstood? Or like, it's like chicken or egg. What came first? Was I a poet already? And then that's why I was misunderstood. I shouldn't know it yet. Or like, who even knows like what order it comes in? But the fact that we need an outlet and find it in creativity. I mean, bless every single parent that pushes their child to do something creative, because they will have that tool forever to empty when they finally reach that point, which for some reason I think is for everyone like in their 20s, when they're like, I did everything I was supposed to do. everything is supposed to magically be wonderful. And I'm here. And sometimes it's like, I do feel good. I mean, everything is good, but I don't feel good. Or, it's something just feels off. And it's like, maybe it's because we're so backloaded. Maybe it's because we aren't making our art. I read something once that was like, you're not tired because you're doing too much. You're tired because you're not doing what you're meant to do. You're not making your art. You're not like, helping people, whatever it is that is your thing. You're just doing too much other stuff. And, blessed because moms are doing so much stuff for so many people. And you have to really be intentional about making your art or setting aside your time for solitude or quiet or whatever, dance class. Right now it's like, I want to take a dance class. Like, and
Yeah.
that's been on the to-do list for like a year. And I'm like, I just need to do it.
Now is the time. The sun is in
Now is
Leo.
the
Your
time.
moon is in Leo. It's time to dance.
It's time to dance, baby.
I love that. And I have a question for you. Being a mom is so beautiful, and I am not a mom yet, but I witness beautiful moms like yourself, and I'm like, wow, that is a superpower, right? And having that superpower means that you have to be so many different things at once, I feel like. And in that, you also have to own both the masculine and the feminine within yourself, which is interesting because being a mom is such a feminine process. It's such a like nurturing and loving and mothering. But at the same time, I feel it's so important for you to have that masculine holding things down within yourself, because otherwise like things can just spin out and you have kids and you have a husband, and somehow, like they do say, the man is the breadwinner of the family, old school traditional way of saying things, right? But I think that women are actually the rocks of a
I have so many thoughts. Okay. So many things I want to say. Okay, so I was just talking to someone about this today, about how the women are the energy of the family, right? Like, so, okay, hang on to that thought while I go into the masculine feminine. Okay, the male is more masculine, secondary feminine. This, I'm learning this all in real time. So this could be totally wrong. But this is sort of my thinking on this because it's very much swirling in my sphere. The female is more feminine with a secondary masculine, but both have both, and both need to work on both, and both need to be balanced in both, right? If the male is too masculine, that's where we see like aggression or like abuse or like not good stuff. But if he's good masculine but no feminine, then there's no connection, right? There's no love making. It's like, it's too serious, right? It's not creative and beautiful. And I think, unfortunately, so many of our men have been the way that we're told, don't be an artist. It's ridiculous. Or don't, like that's suppressed. I think a lot of men have their feminine aspects suppressed because it's girly, or it's like, don't cry. Or the same way, on the flip side, a lot of women have their masculine kind of like convinced away from them, right? Where as a mom, you have this like feminine nurturing quality, which is of the utmost importance. But then you have this masculine piece that you need that's setting boundaries, right? And now you're not just, wait, now it's me and my husband and a child, or two children, or three children, how many children you have. But then it's also his family and your family. And the woman is, I think, the feminine aspect is managing the connections between all of these things, right? And I think that's our job. I think that it's our energy that keeps the family in love with each other and working together. But it's also in that way the masculine piece of the female is saying, hey, no, you can't do that. If you come into my house, you need to this. Or a lot of it, like especially with all of us who had babies during COVID, was like, hey, if you want to come see the baby, you gotta wear a mask. You gotta wash your hands. Like that's the masculine protecting the children, but that's in me, right? My husband's not saying, doing all the protecting for all of us. What if he's at work and I'm like, no, if there's a bear, I'm gonna get a kitchen knife and I'm gonna like fight the bear, right? Like I need that. But it is also about like real time boundaries, or saying like, hey, I gotta say no, I'm burnt out. Or like, hey, I gotta say no, that just feels like a no to me. Whereas I think maybe the people pleasy, like just do everything for everyone, if we only had that piece, we would not survive. it's almost like our masculine and feminine are protecting ourselves within ourselves, right? Like, and protecting our children and nurturing them, right? If we have a too much of a masculine mother who's like working all the time, never home, you know, doesn't have a lot of like loving qualities, like then that child feels like they're missing something, you know. So it's and you said, how do you balance? I don't know, you just try every day. Just try, use effort. And some days you just put your kids in bed and you just weep and you're like, I did such a bad job today. And then some days you're like, I'm doing awesome, nailed it. And some days it's most days it's a combination of both, right? It's a combination of like, oh, did good there, didn't do good there, oh, lost my temper over there, you know. and so I read this book called The Inner Mother. I think it was called The Inner Mother. It's all about the mother wound and how everyone has one. Every single person has a mother wound and a father wound. You know, it's not, it sounds like aggressive to call it a wound, but it's more of like we have this relationship with what we think a mother is and how they energetically transactioned with us, right? And I read this book and there's all these prompts in it. And anyone who's going to be a mother or is a mother, I highly recommend reading it because it will point out a lot of subconscious things that we are doing, that we were taught, that we just do, even like accidentally. Maybe we weren't even taught it, we saw it, you know, and how much energy we sort of take from our children. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. And I was doing it too. Like, and part of it for me has been like, I chose a really great dad for my kids. That was important to me because I didn't have a really great dad. And in a way, I'm so proud of myself. They will never even know. They will never know. They will never have these journals. My daughter will read my journals one day. I will give them to her. She's 13 and she can read them and be like, what? And I'm gonna be like, I know. You don't even know. And there's a piece of that that's like, I can be jealous of my own child. Like, I'm so happy that I did that. And then I'm like, you don't even like, you've missed something that like I had to struggle through. And then it's like, that's hard. Right. And I think our mothers do it to us sometimes too, where they're like, oh, well, you didn't know what it was like back then. My mom said it to me yesterday. Like, I had 2 C-sections back in like, I don't know, 1990, you know, 89 and 90. It was different back then. I didn't have help. I didn't have family. And it's like, yeah, that must have been really hard. And we'll say the same things to our kids, right? And so it's sort of about this energetic exchange. The other thing is like, you know, there's a lot of energetics around like, you know, we want to keep helping our kids. We want to do everything for them. But we can't. We have to let them struggle so that like even like putting their shoes on. Okay, it's like it's gonna take a long time. You're gonna have to be real patient, right? Like sometimes you have to let your kids struggle to put their shoes on because then they don't, if you just do it for them, then they don't get that self-esteem. They don't get to feel proud of themselves, right? And I was reading this thing about how a lot of high achieving people will do things for their children. They'll help them because, you know, maybe that wasn't done for them, or maybe because that's what they believe their role is. Or people with low self-esteem will do it for their kids because it gives them self-esteem, but they don't realize that then they're taking that self-esteem from the child, right? It's like, whoa, like you don't even, I didn't even think of that. Like I have to let my children struggle so that they can build their own self-esteem, and that they don't need me every minute, which is the entire process of motherhood. They need you for everything, and then they need you less and less and less and less and less, and that is so hard. And I felt so, and I was very much triggered by like, oh, I do that. I am clinging to her, or I do feel like she has it good, or I do, you know, all of these things that is like, you have to be very honest with yourself if you want to be a good parent. I don't say good. I mean, I don't know. That's like a subjective term, but if you want to be a really thoughtful, awakened caregiver of life, shower of life, right? Because we're just hosting them, right? We're just like, here, I'm your host family, live in my house, you know, learn my rules, but also like be exposed to a lot of things and, you know, have your journey. It's like an epic letting go. And how do you balance it all? You just you just do the best you can. And then you hit a point where you're like, this is not working. And that's when I was like, I got to read this book, but I'm not reading 1,000 books. Don't read 1,000 books. Hey, listen to yourself. I got to this point where I was like, I need help. What I know and what I'm doing is not working. And I feel burnt out, or I don't feel connected with my daughter. I want to do a better job. Then I was like, okay, I'm gonna read a book. And how did I find the book? I didn't like ask all my mother friends. I was like doing deep research. Okay, mother wound and journaling and the what. And then I found this blog post. And I was like, everything she said is it. She gets it. And at the bottom, it's like, read my book. And I was like, boom, found it. So it's kind of this process of like trusting yourself when you've reached the end of what you know, because none of us know everything. Tell the universe. This is what I do all the time. I'm like, universe, I need some help. Ancestors, people, whoever's with me, I call them my spirit people, my spirit peeps. They're always like hanging around. I'm like, spirit peeps, guys, I need you. And then
Gather
something
up.
just, right, yeah, something just drops in. And I'm like, okay, that was it. That was the message from the universe. Be open to the messages from the universe. That will help you with parenting. The balance part is also like just scheduling. I like every Wednesday, my husband and I have date night. Every Thursday, he goes out with his friend. It's like he has guy time, we have together time. Right? On Mondays, we play pickleball with our friend. On Tuesdays, we do like this thing called Marmot. We do like something for ourselves, like to take care of ourselves. Right? So it's like it's very much like scheduling and having a routine and it being non-negotiable. We never cancel date night. He never cancels his guys' night. Like we just make it sacred. And sometimes it's still too much. This summer, this week has been too much. And he's like, I'm going. And I'm like, I know, have fun. Like we just have to do it.
Yeah.
So part of it's like discipline and part of it's like listening to yourself. And part of it is most of it is making it up as you go along.
So that makes me want to ask you about, so when we were talking about doing this podcast, you shared about how it's important to mother in a way that you are living fully so that your kids get to see that you're
Yes.
living fully and they get to model that, because at the end of the day, like, it's not about what we say, it's about what we do.
Mm,
And it's already like that with grown-ups. What more with kids, right? Why do we think that we're going to tell them to do something and they're going to do something? We have to model it for them to do it, which
right.
also makes me think about how interesting it is that it's such a um it's such a different time, and it's also different for each culture. Let me give you an example. For
Mm-hmm.
me,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with my mom as a housewife. She got married at 17. She is from India, didn't get to go to college. Um, my dad's mom picked her. They were like, okay, she's the one. She got married, came here. And then full on housewife, had to take care of her mom-in-law, and then had to move to India with her kids to let them get her kids, being my siblings, who are 13 and 12 years older than me, so way older than me. So had to move to India, had to move back here, and then just do all these things and be a full housewife, right? So growing up, that was my example, that a woman has to be a housewife. She has to bring up her kids. She has to be good to her mother-in-law. My mom would be like, you have to speak, their two Indian dialects that we speak. We speak Hindi and Sindhi. So she's like, you have to speak, I mean, there are way more Indian dialects in the world. But so she's like, you have to speak Hindi and Sindhi. What's your mom-in-law gonna say if you can't speak it? And the biggest joke
Mm,
now is my mom-in-law is the coolest woman alive and barely speaks Hindi and Sindhi, and it doesn't even matter. And it's so funny because I was brought up in this way of,
mm-hmm.
you're gonna have to get married, and then you'll have to help your husband in the office, and then you'll have to take care of your mom-in-law. And I got married 2.5, a little bit over 2.5 years ago, and it's not like that at all. And
Mm-hmm.
here I am, like, discovering, okay, I'm not working with my husband, which I'm grateful for, because he has his thing and I have my thing, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to work on my soul work, and that's what's important.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had to teach
Mm-hmm.
myself that.
Right. Me too.
So how cool is it to have a mom that's modeling it? I mean, you
Right.
being the mom that's modeling it.
And then still our kids are going to look at us and go, we know so much more now.
Yeah.
You were still this much when you could have been this much. And we're going to say, you don't know how hard it was back then. Right. It's like, we're all just doing better by increments. Right. And I
Exactly.
think for I actually really think that this generation is doing, instead of like little increments, I think we're making like a quantum leap. It feels very big and important. Everyone is taking it very seriously, and people are really thinking about whether or not they want to be parents, and really thinking about how many, and how many is too many. I mean, just a couple of generations ago, it was like people had 9 brothers and sisters. And now it's like, we're not doing that anymore, because that's a lot on the nervous system of the mother, on the physical body of the mother, on the nervous system of the kids. We're kind of thinking about things differently. So, okay, but I want to talk about what you said. Okay, Wolf Mother, this is the whole point of the book, is because children will not do as we say, because they will do as we do, we have to show them. I think the biggest gift we can give them is to show them a mother that is alive, that is fully living. And that is different for everyone. Okay. So my job is writing poetry and raising children, right? So I'm not going into 9 to 5, but some people are, and that's their thing, right? They want to be a teacher. They want to be, we talked about Kelly, I don't know her last name, but who's an astronaut, right? And like, because her child, Delta, sees her as an astronaut, she thinks I can be an astronaut. That's a given, right? I don't have to be an astronaut, but like, duh, I could be one, right? Where I was like, I'm gonna be an astronaut, like, no, like that didn't seem like an easy, of course, to me. And there's this great guy called Preston Smiles that says like, whatever you believe is an of course will happen, right? Like that's like a way of manifesting, right? Of course I'm going to drive this great car. Like, of course I'm going to be like deeply in love. Of course I'm going to have great sex. Of course I'm going to like be a best-selling author. Like if that's an of course, then it's coming. But if we can't see it as an option, like of course I'm going to be a mom that's like balanced, has time with her friends, and is like alive, and like feels great, and is like doing her work and her soul's work and her purpose on this, like, yeah, then our kids are going to be like, duh. But if we don't see that, if we're not showing our kids that, even if we're preaching it to them, go be an astronaut, they're going to be like, okay, but like you weren't. And that's okay. That's okay. Our kids will do things that we are not. But if we show them the spirit of it, if we show them the gumption, if we show them that we're trying to make effort on what's important to us, and that it matters what's important to us, that it's not like, oh, that was like a cute voice that we never followed, right? Like there are things I know my mom didn't follow because it wasn't feasible to her. It wasn't possible. Not possible. I guess anything is possible, but it just wasn't as easy as it needed to be for her to do it. And like I remember growing up and like, oh yeah, well she really wanted to do that, or like, or she, like, even the way that we show our kids relationships, the way we talk to our spouses in front of them, the things we allow, right? The type of homes we grow up in. I mean, all of that is imprinting on them their of courses, right? Like, oh yeah, like of course I'm gonna play soccer, like, or like of course, you show them what they're gonna do. Of course I'm gonna take care of my body. My mom takes care of her body. Of course I'm gonna have time for myself. Like my parents scheduled like me to have some playtime by myself, or I see my mom taking time for herself. All of that is important. That's why when people are always like, why do you travel with your kids? They're too young, they won't remember. It's like, well, first of all, it's not just about them. Like, this is my motherhood. This is their childhood, but this is my life too, and my motherhood. And sometimes I want to. And the second thing is like when we teach them things young by giving them the experience of it, right? Like, my daughter knows, like, I've gone away on my own trips, like just that trip I was telling you about where I like had to decide that I was going to be an illustrator. Like, she knew I was gone she knew I went to Poems of Power for 2 days. She's like, oh, mom's going on an adventure. And I go, I'll miss you and I love you and I'll be back soon. And like, the other thing is, part of this whole thing is only possible if we have a system in place to help us, right? If we have a spouse that's involved, or a partner that's involved, the co-parent that's involved. If we have, a trusted babysitter, if we have an in-law or a grandma or an aunt or someone that will help us with our kids, because I really don't think it's possible if it's somebody who has to be like your mom, who's like, I have to take care of 2 different generations and a home. And when am I doing what I want to do? Right. And that's why so many of the things have been art, because yeah, I can put my kids to sleep and like I can write for a while. Like people can be crocheting, knitting, quilting, sewing, especially because so much of it was useful. We need to quilt for the bed. Okay, I'm gonna make it. That's part of my job. Right. And then a lot of like the loom being like part of women's power. Like we would make things, textiles, because that's what we had time to do and that's what was allowed. It's like, well, painting or writing poetry is like more frivolous, but like same idea. Like we still need those things, but we need help to do them. Right. And if like you're the singular person in your child's life and you're the only attachment that they make, first of all, that's not healthy for either one of you because they need to be exposed to more people and they need to learn from different people, but also because it's too much on our systems. And I know that's me speaking about myself. I know one of my best friends has 4 kids and she just rocks it and loves it and homeschools all of them. And my system can't do that. 2 kids feels maximum to me, right? Like we are full and I have help and they take a nap or have quiet time. And I have an afternoon period where like I do get to write, I get to work on something for myself. And like, I need that, and I just told my daughter, okay, I'm going to go work. Like, please, like, have a good sleep and I'll see you in the morning. And she's like, oh, like, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I'm going to like talk about writing because, I have my book. And she's like, oh, yeah, I know that. And it's like, she knows that. So for her, writing a book would be like, yeah, duh, I can do that. I'm not an astronaut. We all wish we could be everything. So our kids would have like an amazing plethora of like, you could be anything. But if they see us repressed, if they see us putting up with things we shouldn't put up with, if they see us always saying yes when we're burnt out, if they see us saying no to the things that we want to do, that's what they're going to do. And I don't want that. It's my responsibility to make sure my daughter is free. My son is free, that they are like, options abound. I can do anything and I have the power to do it. Then that means I've got to do some cool shit, right? For me, but also for them.
I love how you said this is your motherhood. I think that's
Yeah,
often what that gets taken away. Very often it's like, why
right,
do you have to do that for the kids? They won't remember, or why do you have to do that for them? They this or they that. And then you're like, wait, but it's my life. I'm the mom. I can do whatever I want, whether you think it's valid or not, because I am the mom and these are my kids. And I
right.
think it's such an interesting thought that like society thinks that they have a say on how
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
people raise their children when they are
mm-hmm,
not their children. They did not stomach the children. They did not give they did
mm-hmm.
not give them a home in their belly for 9 months. Yet everyone
Right.
feels like they have a say.
They also don't, I mean, obviously there's some general yeses and general nos that we like are obvious, but there's a lot of wiggle room. And and yes, they're not their children, but also they don't have their karma and their wounding and their DNA. Like a lot of that is important, right? Like if I have this pattern of my mom and grandma, then like my daughter has that. And there is a way of helping her move through that or helping myself move through that. I think that's why it's so important to heal as much as you can while mothering and before mothering, and to be as clear a channel as possible so that your kids don't pick up on so much of your wounding. Like if you can do the work, like that's helping everyone. Also, like we said before, the woman being the energy of the family. Like if we are wounded and hurting, we are lashing, we are exploding, we are the kettle, you know, and everyone's walking on eggshells and then they're trained that's how they be when they're older, you know. And if we can be free and open and flowing and not perfect, never perfect, right? We're going to explode. But do we apologize after? I literally do this with my daughter all the time. We do this thing called dragon breath, where it's like, you just like, you just let it out. And like sometimes I'll be like, I'll explode and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I should have done dragon breath. And she's like, Mom, you should have done dragon breath. And I'm like, oh, I should have done dragon breath. Okay, why don't we do some together? And then we practice because again, it's experiential. She has to see me doing it. My son's not saying a ton of words yet because he's only 2, but he's saying, oh, thank you and you're welcome. Thank you. And I was like, it's so funny. He's so about thank you and you're welcome. And it's like, because we're always saying thank you and you're welcome. Please and thank you and you're welcome. And like it's just practice. It's just training, right? Like we're just training them to be basically similar to us. And if we are more healed, if we are more awakened, if we are more free, if we are more open-minded, then they have more options of how to be. If we are like, this is how we are, this is the doctrine, this is the way, be this or else, it's like, well, they're either going to be that and have a very hard time breaking out of that, or they're going to go the complete opposite way, right? They're going to be the rebel. And neither one of those has connection with the between the child and parent. You rupture that relationship. So it's like, how can we mother, because it's my motherhood too, that feels good to me, right? Like, for me, it doesn't feel good to be burnt out. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. Nobody feels good to be burnt out, but I don't want to be a martyr, right? I don't want to die on the sword of motherhood. I want to love it. And sometimes that means, actually every day, that means my son has a nap and my daughter has quiet time and she plays in her room and she does imaginative things and there's no screens. And like, I fight to the tooth and nail over this. My mom is literally like, you're so intense about the TV. And I was like, yes, we don't watch TV until 5 o'clock. That's the rule. And like, it's always the rule. And it's so much the rule that my daughter will be like, my son will be like, TV, because it's so addicting. And my daughter, who's 4.5, will be like, Sonny, it's not 5 o'clock yet. And I'm like, but there were years where I would battle her and she would cry and she'd throw herself on the floor. And I'd be like, it's my job to keep you safe. And TV's like not really that good for your brain, So it's about making boundaries with your kids and teaching them, this is my boundary. During quiet time, I'm going to go write. This is my boundary. You get to spend time with yourself. I get to spend time with myself. You should know that being with yourself is good. And know that mom being by herself is good too. We spend all day together. Sometimes we need to reset on our own. Right. And so it's like, and it's about like deciding what rules you're going to make. Right. Like, hey, don't smack your sister in the face and make her tooth fly out. Like, you had to go sit down and like stop playing for a minute and then come back and say sorry and like make her feel better. And it's like, yeah, like we're not gonna hate each other in this house. Avina says something, my daughter says something with like an attitude, and I was like, no, try again. I don't help people who yell at me, and you shouldn't help people who yell at you either, right? Like, it's all a mirror. It's all them teach. Like, sometimes when I meet these kids that are like so great, I just look at the mom and I was like, dude, I like you already, because I can tell by the way their child acts that they act that way. And it's not to say that, when kids are screaming and throwing a tantrum that the moms are throwing tantrums either. Okay, that just comes with par for the course. All kids are throwing tantrums. But I do think it is about showing them how to live and not telling them how to live. And yeah. And so my book is wanting to finally reclaim all of those feelings I wasn't allowed to feel. I wasn't able to feel. I was too scared to feel, right? Claiming them all. Those are mine. And those are my words. And I'm going to be brave enough to tell people what I think and what I feel. And you should too.
Amazing.
I do agree. I'm now at the stage where I'm like, oh,
yes, they are.
I just feel great about my art and I love it and I have so much fun making it.
I feel that's the way every artist should feel, but of course it takes a lot of work to get there. But okay, so we're coming up on time. So I want to ask you 2 questions before we
Tell me.
Finish this up. So the first question is, where can people find you? Where can they find your book? And if they want to work with you in any capacity, how can they do that? And the second question is, what makes you a heartist?
Okay. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Kimmery Writes, Kimmery, Writes with an S. And you can also find me on a whole bunch of things. I have a YouTube for spoken word. I don't know what else I have. I have things everywhere. I have a Pinterest. I have all the things. But Instagram is my main thing. My book is called Wolf Mother. Here, I'll show you. It looks like beautiful. And it's called A New Love Story, talking about that love that just exploded my soul when I had my children, and the love story with myself, going through that, realizing, oh my gosh, I'm a creator and I'm alive and I'm this like God in the human form, and so are my children. It's all of that. It's on Amazon. It's also on Barnes and Noble. It's also on a bunch of other things, but Amazon and Barnes and Noble would be the best. Barnes and Noble is the hard copy and Amazon is the paperback. Actually, you can get Kindle hard and paperback, I think, on Amazon. You got options. Um, and new exciting things coming up soon, which is so many of the things that we've talked about, is everyone's an artist. Don't be a ghost artist. You know, if you feel like you were creative and then you weren't, like, you can reclaim it. And there are all these things that we can do to get more in touch with our creativity and to be a clearer vessel and to dance, you know, with the creative divine. And so literally like days ago, I just decided, pulled it out of my somewhere in my field, was like, I've been wanting to write a course. So I'm working on a course for anybody who wants to learn more about being creative or dive into like actual, like, what can I do if I want to be creative? Like, I'm going to tell you things like Julia Cameron says, write morning pages, take yourself on artist dates, right? So many of the things in Big Magic, like giving yourself permission slips, working through your trauma, like doing things with your energy, like acupuncture or Reiki. Like there's so many, there's a my husband used to say there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Okay, that's like a terrible metaphor. There's 1,000 paths to creativity. There's 1,000 paths to God. And so I'm working on a course. So you can find that. I will post it on my Instagram when it is ready, but it will be on Teachable. And I would love to have you there. And it will be so beautiful for your unfolding, for everyone's unfolding. And all of it is things I've done. Nothing I'm going to tell you is like I read a book about it and put it in my course. Like it's all things that I've literally done. And why am I a artist? I have this just like inability to shallowly live, right? I have this inability, I have this like just severe hatred of like small talk and faking it and playing nice, right? All of those things are like so grating to me. And I just decided I didn't want to do that stuff anymore. And when I decided that, boom, that's where I dropped into my heart. And like, boom, that's where I dropped into my art. And like, boom, how can I write the more true thing? And it takes a hell of a lot of bravery because it's so much easier to play nice. It's so much easier to say, oh, how's the weather? Or like, oh, like niceties, niceties, instead of to say, how are you? Not great. Today was hard. Or, you know, I'm all over the place. Or I like to be really honest with people and not to get stuck in there, not to be like, woe is me, or be in your pity, not that, but to be honest. Like I'm moving through a lot of stuff right now. And for me, art has been such a tool for healing, for understanding myself, for playing, you know, for finding that inner child again, for making my people. I just saw something that was like, the only person you should make proud is your 8-year-old self. It's like my 8-year-old self is like just like this. She's like, just more, shave your head. And I'm like, okay, not that. But yes, I'm gonna write more, like create more, like make the children's book, do all the things. Um, and so I think that's why I'm a artist, because I'm trying to go back to that little girl and tell her, you could have been living with your heart up front all along. And since we can't go back in time, we can go from here. And yeah, and so we're homies now, you know, Jesus and my inner child and all the black holes. We're all homies. Creating together.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kimmery, for sharing your voice and your message and your art and your heart. I mentioned in the beginning, but I'll mention it again here. Like, I have Wolf Mother too. I'm loving reading it. The way you write is so potent. There are so many lines that just scream and that I underline, and it just blows my
So
mind with each poem that I
thank
read.
you. Can I read one to you?
Yes,
Do you have a suggestion or do you want me to pick?
you pick.
Okay. I'm gonna do, what would you do if you knew you were loved? Okay, what would you do if you knew you were good? Right? What would you do if you knew you were loved? How I'm on page
I found it.
78, if that's
Yeah.
helpful. Okay. What would you do if you knew you were loved? How would you move? Would you still creep around conversational corners like a scrawny cat that's been scared and underfed? Or would you walk tall into every talk? Do you think you would keep your dreams on your heart, or would you shout them from every open window? Would you chew each piece of food with a tinge of guilt? Or would you revere the earth, your body, the waters that feed them both? I am wondering, really, would you buy a Harley? Would you resolve to never wear clothes to bed? Would you cover your skin in ink? Would you paint every day? Would you put on lipstick to go grocery shopping? Would you realize finally, that you are more warrior than worrier? Would you take your sword into the grocery store with your lipstick on? Would you take it to your relationships? Would you take your own sword to your own flesh and cut away the cysts that you had let grow? Hussy and full of your own self doubts and self sabotages? Would you perform your own surgeries and remove them all? If you knew you were loved, you would not need your own sharp thoughts to mold you into something resembling perfection. If you knew it deep in your blood, running through every vein, you would be quenched. You would throw out every pair of size 2 jeans. You would pierce your nose. You would touch yourself and moan. You would never let corn syrup touch your tongue. You would sing, oh, you would sing. Brittany, maybe. Shania, obviously. Lizzo, more Lizzo. You would shake your ass and laugh as it jiggles. You would never, ever again apologize for your tears. You would build a boat and you would float. No, you would sail. Of course, you are you. So you would build a boat big enough to fit your man, your children, your mother, your brother, your sister, all your baby nieces, every single one of the powerful women you love, and by God, you would sail. If you knew you were loved, there would be no destination at all. You would sail to explore, to feel, to adore. You would sail to find more love and repatriate it to every other living being. There would be worldwide reparations. Every single soul that had ever been hurt would be delivered hot, hot smoke and love. Full body somatic healing of the most luxurious kind. If you knew you were loved, you would know you are loved. You would give yourself away like bouquets, like mouth melting chocolate, like diamonds. If you knew you were loved, you would be full every single day of your life. I mean, bursting through your skin full, you would spill over into every other human, into the ocean itself, into the air. And soon, the whole world would be saturated, flooded by the soft tsunami of your heart. And we would burn all the boats and we would kiss each other and float.
Thank you for reading that. It's so different reading someone's work and listening to someone read their work. And
Thank you
listening
for
to
letting
you
me.
read your work is like, whoa.
You know what's just so wild is I still feel them when I read them. Like I still like some of these will make me cry. And like it's so crazy that we can even write things that make us cry. Like how beautiful is that? And we can do it with our own art. Like, oh, I'm just in love with this life. I'm in love that I get to do this, that I chose to do this, that this is an option. So thank you for letting me share.
Yay, thank you for sharing. And it's been such a pleasure to have you on here.
Thank you. Thank you.